Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is the Question Guy podcast. And for the third time, Ghulam Fernandes is here with me because she has a very important and very special mission in her life. She's a grief coach. Now, this isn't her talk on coaching, but I want to talk about why your mission for you is so important. Let's go into that conversation. Why is grief coaching so important to you?
So, as I have mentioned before, I had a lot of losses when I was growing up, and I was stuck in the pain of them for many years. I couldn't understand why I was stuck or how to move forward. And it puzzled me when I came across people who seemed to have had a loss and they seemed to be moving forward. They seemed to be able to talk about the loved one that they had lost without getting really emotional and bursting into tears and being overwhelmed with emotions and sadness. And so I set out on a whole mission to learn more about grief and how to move forward and so on. And over a number of years, I tried many, many different things, went for counseling, all sorts of things. And then eventually, when I actually came to a point where I had managed to settle things and was ready and able to move forward, I felt I don't want this for other people. I don't want people to be stuck for years in pain and therapy, not knowing how they can move forward. And the main problem was that nobody had ever talked to us about what grief is, how it can impact you, or the common mistakes that can get you stuck.
Mm.
And so, without good information, you're very open to misinformation. And so, especially after my mum died, when somebody trying to be helpful said, "Oh, you mustn't cry. You've got to be strong for your brothers and sisters because you're the oldest girl." I took that to be the truth. And then I spent years not dealing with my grief because I thought, I mustn't cry. I've got to be strong for my brothers and sisters. But there's only so long that strategy can work for. So when my older brother died, and then my sister died, and then my father died, then I had three miscarriages, that strategy was not working. I was not functioning. I couldn't think clearly. Life seemed to have lost its point. And I found myself really feeling confused and overwhelmed. And that's when I took time out to travel and try and make sense of everything. And now I'm really passionate about helping people to understand more about what grief is, how you can get stuck, what kind of knowledge, tools, and processes can help you move forward. So this has been on my heart for a very long time, but in about a year and a half ago, I thought, if not now, when? So I actually started my practice as a grief specialist, and now I work with people who are struggling with grief and want to move forward and get their life back.
Well, then let's answer some really basic questions. What is grief? Let's start there.
Yeah. So I learned through my training that grief is actually a normal and natural response to loss of any kind. I used to think it was just to do with bereavement, but actually, when something comes to an end or there's a change, a significant change in a familiar pattern of behavior, that actually can produce feelings of loss and grief.
Okay.
And that came as a revelation to me when I first heard that there are over 40 life events that can impact your heart and leave you with feelings of loss and grief. And that if there is any unresolved issues in that relationship or in whatever happened, it doesn't just go away with time. You actually need to take some actions that help you to identify what's unresolved and then deal with it. And so that was a complete revelation to me. I just thought that things happen, you're kind of a victim, and you just have to sit and wait it out, keep yourself busy, distract yourself with this and distract yourself with that, and hoping that over time it will kind of heal. What I learned through my training is that time is not the healer, it's actually the actions that you take over time that make the difference. And if you've been burying and finding a way of suppressing all those things, they will sit there until something, causes a trigger and then pop up. So for me, all the grief around my mum was sitting there. And then when my brother died, it all came up. So I not only had to deal with the grief of my brother, but also all the unresolved grief of my mother. And so I think it's really important to understand that grief is not only negative in its impact, but it's cumulative. So if you have a habit of stuffing things, in your backpack or in a box on a high shelf or whatever you mentally do to cope with things, then that's like stacking one thing on top of another. And at some point, it won't take much to take you over the edge. So I'm really passionate about helping people to understand more about grief, but not just that, to have the knowledge, the tools, and the processes that equips you to handle grief when it happens. It's a normal and natural part of life, and it's happening all the time, every day in different forms.
Well, I'm
And
glad that you said that it's a normal part of life. So but earlier you mentioned there are 40 things in life that can trigger a grief response. Now, I don't want you to go through a checklist,
I can give you
but
some examples.
well, the curiosity here, my thinking is it's not just about somebody dying.
Yes,
It's not just about, oh, my mom passed
yes,
or
yes.
something like that. There are other life experiences that can cause you to implode. And
Yeah.
so can you just identify some of the non-relational aspects of life that would cause you to respond in that way?
So looking at my own life, I was born in Pakistan, and then I moved to the UK in 1962. Now, that relocation had all sorts of different losses attached to it. Nobody died, we were all alive, but leaving your friends behind, leaving your familiar culture and
Mm.
places that you were used to, and so on, it was like a huge change. And so with that came various losses. Another example where nobody died was in my primary school, there was another Asian girl, and when she left, the teacher by mistake crossed me off the register. So for a number of, it sounds funny now, but at the time, I felt like I'd lost my identity.
Oh, wow.
So I was called by this other girl's name. And because when I came to this country, I didn't know much English. And by the time I knew enough English to say that's not my name, it's like it was hard for them to accept that they could have made a mistake, and they just, that'd be ridiculous. Like, that can't be possible. That can't
Right.
have happened. So I went throughout primary school feeling like I was somebody else.
Oh,
And
wow.
when I moved to secondary school, I thought, okay, now I really need to change it back to my name. Everybody kept saying, why have you changed your name? Like, it's never my name. So that's just small examples.
Yeah.
There are many others. Sometimes there can be a loss of trust event. I mean, I remember one time when my father was coming back to the UK from having visited on holiday. I was a toddler, but very vocal, and I insisted that I was going to go with him. And he was trying to explain, no, you need a passport. I don't care. I'm coming with you, Daddy, and all that stuff. Eventually, he didn't know what to do. So, for a peaceful life, he lied to me, and he said, well, you can't come to England in that dirty dress. You better run home and get changed. And I was like, will you really wait? I said, yeah, yeah, no, I'll definitely wait, but you got to rush because we haven't got all day.
Oh, my
So I
goodness.
was skipping home thinking I was going with my daddy. And when I got home, I remember there was a suspicious exchange of glances between my mum and that cousin who'd brought me back. So when I went inside to get changed, they locked the door.
No.
And they were doing the best they could to try and manage the situation, but obviously I was I felt betrayed. I
Mm.
felt I lost trust. And I made it mean, usually it's not just what happens, it's what we make it mean. So I made it mean that you can't trust people in general and men in particular. So you can imagine how that impacted my life for years.
Wow. Well, I
So
could
those
see,
are a few examples, loss of trust, loss of confidence, loss of faith,
yeah.
romantic breakups, moving, changes in job roles, redundancies, financial health, many situations where things change.
So without going through the checklist, you then said that you have to take action and
Yes.
not let time is not the healer.
Yeah.
There's the old adage, time heals all wounds, and you just said that's not true. So that means the individual has to do something. What are some of the key things? And I don't want to take away your secret sauce as a grief coach, but what are some of the key elements, maybe one or two, that puts the accountability and the responsibility of onto the person to do things?
So I often talk about having a moving forward mindset. So one of the first things that people need to do is really to notice what is happening with their mindset. So sometimes people get into a blame frame. So they're asking themselves questions and others questions on how can they fix the blame for what's happened.
Hmm.
What happened? Why did it happen? Where did it happen? Who was involved? Now, all those questions might help you to understand and what happened and who was to blame, but it doesn't actually move you forward. It doesn't change anything. So I often say it's really important to recognize that um, you need to focus more on outcomes because you can't change what's happened, but you can choose how you respond to it. So the quality of questions that you ask yourself are going to make a huge difference. Um, so outcome frame questions might be things like, what do I need to do right now that will help me to get through this? Where can I get some resources that make help me make sense of this? Who can I reach out for help? Um, those kind of questions. How can I create something good out of this terrible situation? How can I honor the memory of the person that I've lost? How can I, in their name, create a legacy that will live on beyond them? So the quality of the questions that we ask make a huge difference as to whether you move forward or not. I think also having good information and understanding about what grief is and what can cause unresolved grief. So, unresolved grief, there are three main causes. And the first one is like in my sister's case, after she died, I was left thinking about what could I have done better? What could I have done more of? What could I have done differently? And being preoccupied with the idea that if you had done things differently, better or more, then somehow things would have been better. The second cause can be, like in my mum's case, just as she was about to leave, I had this sudden urge to tell her that I loved her. They were going on holiday, but I looked around at the people and that would come to say goodbye, and then this logical part of me popped up and said, "Oh, don't make a fuss. She'll be back in 6 weeks." Now, obviously, she died while she was on holiday. She wasn't back in 6 weeks. So every time I thought about my mum, I would be preoccupied with why didn't I tell her that I loved her? Why did I listen to my logical self, etc. And it's as if, that relationship was stuck at that point, and I couldn't really connect with all the other good things that we'd had before. I just go back to why didn't I?
Right.
And the third type of cause can be where there's a loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations, and something that you longed for or hoped would happen now isn't going to happen because of the change. So I remember somebody I spoke with, her dream in life was to be a good wife and mother. That's all she wanted, she said. That's my dream. So sadly, when their marriage broke up and she ended up divorced, it's like, the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations of the life that she wanted. And then being preoccupied with that and getting stuck there. So being able to understand what some of the things are that can cause the unresolved grief then makes it easier to think about how. So in the program that I run, we help people to understand better information about grief, what it is, how it works. We also talk about some of the common misinformation, like, oh, you've got to keep yourself busy, or oh, just get yourself another dog, or get yourself another boyfriend, or whatever the loss is.
Right.
Just be strong. That's the one that got me. Be strong. I spent years trying to be strong, but that doesn't actually shift things. So by understanding what the common misinformation and the common unhelpful one-liners that you've been brought up with, helps you to be better equipped to kind of see where you're at and make different choices. And then we have created frameworks and tools which can actually help you to search where you are and where you want to get to, and then giving you tools for actually identifying what's unresolved for you, and then processes of how you can actually resolve those things so that you can move forward again. And it just makes a huge difference once you've got better knowledge. I mean, I recently had a client who was really struggling with the fact that her mum had been diagnosed with dementia. And she was really, really having a tough time coping because she didn't realize that she was actually grieving.
Mm.
And she said to me, I don't understand why I feel so bad. It's not like she's died. And I said, well, did you know there are over 40 life events that can impact your heart and leave you with feelings of loss and grief? And that's what's going on. So we decided to work on helping her to identify what the unresolved issues were and what was it she needed to settle so she could cope better. And yeah, no, she's done so well. Her life's been really transformed. And more importantly, instead of worrying about how will I cope when she dies, what we call anticipatory grief, she's actually focusing on how can I make the most of the time that we have together.
Okay.
Um,
Which brings me to my last question for the time that we have remaining. The expression of emotion. We have a difficult as human beings, we have difficulty understanding. Now, some go deep dive into only trust your emotions and don't trust your logical brain, which I don't adhere to. We are a whole being. We are holistic in our nature. So we have a brain that helps us think and emotions that kind of tell us how to respond to things, but sometimes we don't, we're never taught how to respond correctly to a situation. Is it okay to cry? Is it okay to be afraid? Is it okay to express those things? What's your insight into emotions?
so the first thing is to really understand and recognize that each person's grief journey is unique. Sometimes people will come and they'll say, oh, I really feel I should cry more. I haven't cried, as if something's wrong with them.
Oh,
Or they'll come, I'm crying all the time. What's wrong with me? And I say, no, each person's journey is unique. What's happened and how it's impacted you is unique. And it's absolutely fine to cry, and it's absolutely fine not to cry. It's absolutely fine to find yourself getting angry, and it's absolutely fine to find yourself feeling at peace, even though people think you should be more upset, because each person's journey is unique, and the resources they have are different. So the first thing is really to let go of the shoulds and oughts and musts that sometimes people come across. And there is a model, you may have heard of it, about the stages of grief, which actually, if you look into it, was really designed to look at people who were dying, not people who were grieving.
Hmm.
And so sometimes people start comparing themselves either to somebody else or to a model and think they should be doing it like that. You know, what stage am I in and what stage is next and how should I be behaving? No, you've got to be aware of who you are and what is happening for you, what is helping you. And again, sometimes people will think, oh, well, that helps so and so, so maybe it will help me. But we're different. What helps you might be absolutely the wrong thing for me. So I think it's about taking the focus of trying to do it everybody else's way or please them and really take time to connect with your own emotions. The second thing I would say is that we need to understand the nature of emotions, that often it's to do with where we're putting our attention, what we're saying to ourselves internally, or what we're picturing to ourselves in our mind, that then cause us to get those emotions. Sometimes, I mean, before I understood that, I thought emotions just happened and they just go away. But you know, if somebody did an exercise where they got me to think about a lemon, and the more I thought about it, the more I could find my, you know, mouth sort of imagining the taste and then getting the juices flowing and things. And it's the same if you're picturing a future and saying to yourself, how will I cope? I
Hmm.
can't imagine coping. That will give you feelings of anxiety and all sorts of things. If you're focusing on the past, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? You'll end up with feelings of guilt and so on and so forth. So becoming aware of what's the conversations that you're having and how helpful are they or not, and choosing to put your attention and bringing yourself back to the present, because this time now is really all we have, and this is all that's really real. The future, we don't know what it holds. The past is gone. It, you know, we can't change it. So one of the things through the program, we encourage people to have I've created something called the Grief Emotions Toolkit, so that you can actually have more control's the wrong word, but you're better able to manage them so that you're able to be able to handle things more resourcefully rather than just feeling overwhelmed with your emotions.
Good. Where can people find you? I know that we do a lot of engagement on LinkedIn. I see
Yeah,
on your background that you're also on Facebook.
I
Um,
am.
so social media, where are you on social media?
Yes, I'm on Facebook. I have a good way to connect with me is actually through my Facebook group, because it gives you an opportunity to ask questions, access various resources. I also have a gift for your listeners, called the 10 Common Mistakes of Handling Your Grief, which they're very welcome to download. I'm happy to send you that link.
Good.
And I can send a link to the Facebook community as well. I have a website, so I'm happy to give you all of those links so that whatever works for people.
I think
Uh,
that'd be wonderful.
yeah,
Ghulam Fernandes, thank you so much for this conversation. As always, I wish you the best in helping people deal with their grief, because as you said, without dealing with it, without taking control over it, if that's the right word, you're going to be stuck in it, and nobody needs to be stuck in it. This has been another edition of the Question Guy podcast. I'll see you next time. Take care.
yeah. Thank you.